Greetings, this is Rebecca McCarthy again for English 102 at South Seattle Community College. Welcome back to class. In this first week, I asked you not only to read the first part of 1984, but I also asked you to look at a couple articles. One of the first articles I asked you to look at is from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and it's on the term omnipresence. I also asked you to look at this short video about Facebook in Egypt and how Egypt utilized social media in order to help them with their revolution. And I asked you to read an article called "What is Academic Writing?" And I want to go over these real quickly. We're not going to spend a lot of time on them with this podcast, but I do want to invite you to make some connections between these articles, and especially with what you may be writing for your final project. Now, as you know, the final project in this class is you're going to write a paper on any topic you want to, but that deals specifically with power relationships between a big brother entity and a little brother entity. In some of these relationships, you're going to find that there is negotiation taking place between the parties so that there is agreed upon level of balance of power. So, for example, let's go back to the idea of a married couple. Often married couples spend a great deal of time negotiating power relationships and what realm or what aspects of life that each one of them will probably take the lead on. And this is a continuous negotiation, and for successful marriages to actually last a long period of time, you have to have successful negotiation. If you look at a situation such as 1984, or as some people would argue, the way that life was in Egypt, you'll find that sometimes there is no negotiation going on. You have a totalitarian government. That means there's absolute control between one entity, in this case Big Brother, over a whole nother entity, Little Brother. So it's important to figure out, why and how sometimes power relationships are either negotiated or they aren't negotiated. And the reason I have us look at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on omnipresence is because one could argue that in these totalitarian governments where you have a big brother kind of entity, this entity takes on an omnipresent property, almost a godlike property, which is basically what this article is about. And I'm going to briefly read the first part of the first paragraph of the article and touch upon it briefly. Omnipresence is the property of being present everywhere. According to Western theism, God is present everywhere. Divine omnipresence is just one of the divine attributes, although it has attracted less philosophical attention than such attributes as omnipotence, omniscience, or being eternal. There is, however, an increased philosophical question involving omnipresence. How can a being who is supposed to be immaterial be present at or located in space? Now let's apply this kind of idea to Big Brother in 1984. Big Brother, as we asked in the very first podcast about 1984, we don't know necessarily if Big Brother is actually a human being that really exists, or if Big Brother is this idea, this larger-in-life idea that has taken on a reality such as a god or a God being. And in a sense, it doesn't matter because Big Brother is ever present at all times. The telescreens, the constant watching, the posters. One of the things that control the people of Oceania is this fact that Big Brother is omnipresent. And so the question for us becomes, especially if we're going to write on this topic, how and in what ways do totalitarian leaders and governments take on this omnipresent attitude or feeling? Is it done through purely propaganda? Is it done through creating a sense of love? Is it done through creating of this leader a godlike presence? I want you to ask yourself that, and when you read this article, which basically is more centered upon religion, but it's really this idea, this topic of omnipresence that we're interested in, how is it created in 1984? And how might it be created in different totalitarian governments? So keep that in mind. Most of this week, we have talked a great deal about how Big brother can control little brother, and that's been most of our focus and control. But we all know that there are cases where little brother actually can turn the tables on big brother. And if little brother is unhappy about the way things are, they often can have and can find a way to overturn things and to create it anew. And of course, this is kind of what we had in Egypt. Now, a couple years ago, actually, I think it was just about a year ago, we started following this big protest in Egypt to oust the government there. And what is interesting is this protest was made viable. One could even argue that it became successful quite literally because of social media. That the average person, that is the average little brother, was better able to organize, to get together, and to agree upon protesting the government and how things were by the use of social media. Now, when you watch this video, I want you to keep in mind that a couple things came to play. First of all, a lot of people in Egypt actually had access to technology. And this is really important because the organization would not have happened if there wasn't access to technology. Most people in Egypt actually has a phone that either A, can get on the internet or at least has instant messaging capabilities. Also, access to social networks such as YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter were not immediately curbed in Egypt itself. A lot of these social networks are actually not okay for some governments. For example, in China, right? China has their own set of social media in order to replace this larger forum. And that way they can, if you will, control and have a better watch on how people are interacting on these social medias. So access to this media and access to technology was actually present, and it was even present by people of the lower classes, because the technology wasn't quite as expensive as sometimes we see in this country. So that is one of the things that we have to keep in mind. The other thing we have to keep in mind is the power of the images. What happened was that we had some major powerful images of police killing and beating up people, and they were posted on YouTube. And then those images were then again posted on Facebook, and then that allowed for people to come together. So here we have a situation that we don't see in 1984. There is opportunity, right, for people to find a way to get together and to challenge the power that they are presented with. So keep that in mind as you view that video. All right, so let me end this last podcast for this week on the article, What is Academic Writing? And we're already talking about it in the discussion forum, mostly about the myths of academic writing. But what I would like to do is I'm going to take you to the end of the article, and I want you to focus a little bit on this idea of what composes an academic paper. In our class, we are doing an argument paper. And if you go to page 9 of the article, you'll see that there is a discussion on academic writing and what is an argument. And it's important for you to understand this idea of an argument because it is not a shouting match. We're not trying to win by being the loudest. An academic argument is a very reasoned argument in which you take a side and you defend that side. You have an opinion and you're going to defend that opinion. And it's really important to understand this distinction because when you write your paper, I don't want to see a paper on the history. I don't want to see just a research paper where you tell me about something. I want to see an argument paper where you take a position and you defend it. And in an academic paper, the best way to defend it is also by talking about and acknowledging opposing points of view. And this is going to be very important because when we don't acknowledge opposing points of view within an argument, we do what was called card stacking, right? We give just one side of the story, and that's actually not a good way to win an argument. A better way to win an argument is to recognize opposing opinions and then dismantle those opposing opinions. So I'd like to keep that in mind as you start working on your papers, that the research part will be important. And indeed, part of your paper might be presenting some history about the topics you're going to argue about. But in the end, you're going to offer an academic argument. You're going to tell me what you are arguing, and why. And that's basically going to be how you will construct your thesis statement. In this paper, on page 11 throughout the rest of the article, you have the 3 common types of college writing assignments: the closed writing assignment, the semi-open writing assignment, and the open writing assignment. In this class, what we're basically doing is the category of the semi-open writing assignment. So I want you to take a little bit of extra time and reread that section so that you have an understanding of what I am asking you to do for this paper. Okay? Finally, spend some extra times and reread over the 3 characteristics of academic writing. It is very, very important, and I think that the author does a very, very good job with here and also the format of the academic essay. Indeed, the format of the academic essay is pretty much what I personally focus on when I am grading and evaluating your papers. So going over these 8 different elements a couple times while you're writing your paper will be very beneficial to you and to your final grade on the paper itself. All right? So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you on the discussion boards, and I will have more podcasts for you next week. Take it easy and goodbye.